Hello there. As part of an exploration of South African white wines, I'm taking a look at some wines from the Mullineux family. And this particular wine is their 2022 Swartland Old Vines White. So the winery here was started by Chris and Andrea Mullineux in 2007, and almost instantly they seem to become standard bearers for this region, for Swartland. And I think a big reason for that is the fact that the leading South African wine guide, John Platter's guide, has actually recognised them 5 times as their winery of the year in that short space of time. Possibly it's also helped by the fact that their terroir wines are high quality wines that have helped define the flavours of the various sub-regions of Swartland and their soil types. The region here has quite a long history of grape growing. Certainly there was wide-scale planting in the 1960s for an anticipated wine boom. One benefit of that is the fact that there are now plenty of mature old vines for winemakers to select their fruit from. Now the Mullineux vineyards are farmed entirely sustainably. In the winery their approach is to use as few inputs as possible to allow the wine to make itself. So the Old Vine White is principally Chenin Blanc. However, its blend involves 5 other grape varieties as well. The Mullineux say this is a wine that aims to express the combination of these old vines and the ancient soils of the region. So as I say, this is principally Chenin Blanc. I believe it's 72.4% Chenin Blanc. There's 6.4% of what they describe as Semillon Gris, 6.3% of Clairette Blanche, 6.3% of Grenache Blanc, 6.2% of Viognier and 2.4% of Verdelho. And these different varieties grow throughout the different soil types of the area, which broadly are iron soils, granitic soils and schist. And they say the Chenin gives the wine its texture and its backbone, so I'm assuming backbone of acidity. The Clairette Blanche and the Clairette Gris can probably be seen as more restrained grape varieties, and they're described as giving the wine salinity. Then the final 3, the Viognier, the Semillon and the Verdelho, give richness and opulence to the wine. So the wine was picked entirely by hand across a number of vineyards between the 20th of January and the 11th of February, and yields range from between 2 to 5 tonnes per hectare. On arrival at the winery, the bunches were all chilled. There was quite an oxidative whole bunch pressing went on, and then the juice was allowed to settle. Once it had settled overnight, the fruit went into old oak barrels, and their indigenous yeasts were allowed to initiate the fermentation. Fermentation was quite long. It took about 9 weeks to complete. And after that, they allowed a natural malolactic conversion to occur. So there was no inoculation with either yeasts or a malolactic bacteria. And the wine aged in barrel for 11 months. The barrels that were being used were between 3rd and 5th fill, so there won't be a lot of new oak influence in that. Also, they were quite large, so some were 500 litres and the balance were 2,000 litre foudre, so larger ovals. And barrel aging went on for 11 months. So let's take a look at the wine, shall we? The first impression I get is of the colour. That is a relatively deep yellow colour, quite vibrant. Swirling it, this particular wine is labelled as 13.5%. I'm told it's actually 13.4, but there are legal tolerances that allow that sort of difference between what's expressed on the label and the actual analysis. The wine is relatively readily throwing some delicate tears on the glass there. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? Well, you really do get an opulence. It's a rich, sort of very ripe apricot note that bounces out of the glass at you, but it's not simple and straightforward in that way. That's followed up by mineral notes. There's that salinity that I was talking about. And there is a sort of a lemony freshness coming through as well. So let's have a taste. On the palate there's quite an opulent stone fruit nature right at the front of the mouth, but that's moderated by toasty notes. There are those hints of sort of gunpowder, perhaps showing some of the effects of the natural ferment. The salinity is quite obvious around the sides of my tongue, and that's also where I'm seeing this good acidity. There is a nice sort of crisp twang to the end of the wine. It's helping to lift fruit that otherwise might have been quite rich and perhaps even a little unctuous. And it's giving it good length. There are lemony notes, there's salinity, there's quite a mineral cut through the whole thing. So actually the impression of opulence is an initial one on the front of the tongue, and what you're left with on the finish is a much more pungent, linear, saline and citric note. Minerality that perseveres, backed up by a lovely mouth-watering acidity. The Wine Searcher aggregated critic score for this vintage of this wine is 92. I think that's a pretty good score. There might be an argument for suggesting it's possibly worth a 93. Certainly there's a pungency that adds an extra dimension to the wine after its initial opulence. For that reason, I suspect it would probably age quite happily for 3 to 4 years, but given its ripeness, it might be a better option to enjoy it now. The wine has complexity, lovely length and a superb intensity. Its alcohol is beautifully balanced, and the whole thing is lifted by that excellent stab of acidity running through the whole thing. I think the pungency of the acidity would cut through an awful lot of strong, rich sauces and make this a real food-friendly wine. I've certainly found it very impressive. So thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, do please press the like button. We'd really appreciate that. If you have any friends you think might like to watch the video, feel free to pass it on. That would be great. If you have any comments, please pop those in the comments box below. We'd really love to hear your feedback about the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to that. I'll leave a link in the notes below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, and that way you can see if it's available in your market and at what price. It's certainly a wine that I'm glad I sought out. So thank you once again for joining us, and I do hope you'll make some time and come and join us for another video tasting in the very near future. Till then, bye for now.